Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 146 with Brent Hendrich. I had a great chat with Brent and we talked about so many things, including skipping school and using his job at Starbucks to get his first gigs in audio. We talk about going freelance, mixing and production approaches, content creation, delegation, mixing templates, communication with mastering engineers, his approach to mixing vocals, getting more minimalistic over time when mixing, setting goals, holding himself accountable, and working on what matters and everything in between. So this was a great chat. I really enjoyed it. And I think you will too. So with all that to say, here's my chat with Brent Hendrich coming up right here on Secret Sonics. Hey everyone. If you're anything like me, you often find yourself looking for business insight in podcasts. And I'm sure many of you are also into meditation and reflection to help better understand yourself. Former guest of the show, Carl Bonner, decided to launch a podcast that brings these two elements together. It's a series of guided self-reflection exercises, but specifically for freelance creatives like you and me, focusing on the struggles we face as we try to grow our businesses, while also finding more happiness in the work that we do. It's called Thanks for Thinking. It's definitely an unusual format, but if you want to grow your self-awareness, find deeper career satisfaction, and make more money, then I think this podcast might be for you. Experience it for yourself and click the link in the show notes below. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I am your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Brent Hendrich. Brent is an award-winning producer, mixer, and songwriter with over 20 years of experience as a working professional in the Nashville music industry. Through countless hours of studio experience, Brent has been building a track record consisting of a diverse repertoire of content spanning across genres of pop, rock, singer-songwriters, and film and TV. Brent and I recently connected online, and I invited him on the show, which he's graciously agreed to do. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Brent.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben. I'm excited to be a part of the show. I'm a big fan of it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, and how are things going in Nashville these days?
Great. Really busy. Things are good. It's starting to get hot. And, other than that, yeah, things are pretty much the way they always are.
Amazing. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. We've been schmoozing for 15 minutes now, but tell the audience a little bit about your story, I guess how music became a thing for you and how that kind of evolved into the production direction.
Sure, yeah. I guess maybe just start back to where it all began, which was in East Tennessee. I've been in Tennessee my whole life. And
wow.
So I, at a really early age, fell in love with music. I just remember constantly playing cassette tapes in my parents' stereo. I grew up in the church, so there was a lot of music there as well. And became obsessed with music at an early age just as a listener. And then had a Yamaha keyboard as well that I would kind of write with this notation, write down these ideas and then try to record it on a tape recorder. So I guess that's really where, it all first started for me as far as the music goes. I also had a love for electronics and would collect, microchips and trade them on the playground in third grade with a friend of mine. And so I always there's this engineering side of me and this music side of me. And it started probably, in elementary school. And it's been, something that's been very strong ever since then. So yeah, that's kind of where things really got started for me.
So how did that kind of take off into getting into the audio engineering side of things?
Sure, yeah. Oh, there's definitely a story there. So after, just through the childhood, having this love for music, it came, the teenage years and really wanting to get an instrument. And guitar was kind of what I chose. So my grandmother got me a guitar and an amp, and that was probably 12, 13, something like that. And just started taking lessons and, learning the basics. And from there, started joining some bands in high school, and there was a guitar kind of club class, program that I was a part of, played some in church. And so I was playing a lot of guitar. And then the band that kind of really came together in my high school years, we decided to save up some money and record our first EP, 5-song, EP. And the studio in our hometown, it was called University Recording, and it was in the back of this. It's called the Gas Shack. They sell natural gas supplies and things like that. But in the very back of the building, there was a studio.
Sounds like a hazardous place to have a recording studio.
Yeah, it probably was. We didn't care at the time. We just loved what we were doing. But totally. Yeah, so there's a studio in the back. This would have been 98, I think, somewhere around there. Pro Tools was really young at the time. It was pretty basic, but they had a Pro Tools system and like a Soundcraft console and a couple ISO booths, and it was just a hobby, I think, of the guy who owned the gas shack. It was just something that he liked to do in his free time. So we recorded our first EP there, and that was when the bug really hit me. It was like, wow, this is cool. I can come in here with my friends. We can record these songs that we wrote, and then I can, we can put it on the CD, and I can go take it and like show my friends at school like these songs I've been writing. And I just got hooked from then. I never really had a desire to be a performer. That's never been me. I've always wanted to be more behind the scenes, someone who's taking however much time is required to make a really great product, and then sharing that with other people. And so that's kind of been my MO from the get-go, or at least I discovered that, I guess, in high school, that being on stage wasn't really for me. And so from there, we released that EP, and then it came time to do a second project, and we just decided, or I don't know if it was me or maybe me and a buddy of mine, that we were going to do it ourselves. And so this would have been early home recording, late 90s.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, I had
super early.
Yeah, I had this really cheap HP desktop computer that was around our house that my parents had purchased. And I was working at Chick-fil-A throughout high school and saving up money. And I realized that there was I found this interface called Gadget Labs, I think was the brand. They kind of weren't around very long, but it was an 8-in and 8-out interface that you could get with like one of those really old school printer cables. It was like 25, it looked like a big DB25 kind of connection. I bought this interface. It was only like $500 or $600 at the time, which looking back at, for the late 90s for 8-in and 8-out interface, it was, I guess, a pretty good deal. And then it's got a Cakewalk Pro Audio 9 was the software that I ended up buying from probably, I think it was Mars Music at the time. It was like before Guitar Center, I think, was even a thing. And then the Waves Native Power Pack, which is like early Waves stuff, just the basic, whatever, the C1 and the Q1 through 10. And,
L1.
Yeah, True Verb, maybe, And so, with Cakewalk Pro Audio 9 and those plugins and this interface. And then my buddy, he had like a Mackie 8-channel console, and that was our preamps. And then that was that was the studio that it was pretty bad. And then all the mics and the stands were just stuff that we like borrowed from our churches and things, So we it was just the bare bones setup. And
but that's how you start, right? That's like you got to just whatever you got. You know?
So my bedroom, it was a big bedroom down in the basement, and that was the control room. And then I had some Alesis monitors as well. I guess I forgot to mention those. And then in the den, which was connected to my bedroom down in the basement, was where we had the drum kit set up. So we had, 6 or 8 mics on the kit and a snake that we had borrowed from somewhere. And then we had created what would you call it? Closed circuit TV. Like we had two TVs, one by the drummer and one in the control room, and we could and video cameras, and we could
legit for late 90s.
Yeah, it was way better than a Tascam,
especially in high school.
4-track. Yeah, so it was. Yeah, no, actually, it was. Not only did we do that record there with 10 or 12 songs, I had friends from school that would come over and record some demos and ideas, and so that's really when the bug really bit me, was the late 90s, like 98, 99, as a junior or senior in high school. And I'm already starting to get some really great experience. Not I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm learning along the way. And so at that time, it's like, okay, I want to do this for a living. It's obvious that this is like what I'm really passionate about. I started thinking about, where do I want to go to school after I get out of high school, and the first choice was Belmont University, which is here in Nashville. Nashville made sense because it was a music town. It was only 4.5 hours away, so I could still be somewhat close to home. And at the time, I was really into a lot of the music coming out of Nashville, like on the CCM or Christian rock side of things. And so I was listening to a lot of that stuff, and I was like, it just makes sense for me to go there. A lot of the producers that I'm really into right now are based out of Nashville as well. So I came and toured Belmont, and really thought that maybe Belmont was going to be the school that I was going to, the school that I would go to. And while I was in town touring Belmont, I set up a meeting outside of a town here in Franklin, or called Franklin, that's just outside of Nashville. With there's a big engineer here in town by the name of Ronnie Brookshire, and he was from my hometown, and he was working on a lot of big records at the time. And so he graciously, took me out to lunch one day while I was here in town just touring Belmont. And I was like, hey, do I need to, what do you think about Belmont? Does it make sense for me to go to university if this is what I want to do? And he was just like, really, you don't, it's no one really cares where you went to school in this industry. It's more about what you can do and what you're able to accomplish. And he said, you're welcome to, but I don't think that it's a necessity for you. And that was really a good piece of advice that I still look back on and go, okay, I'm glad that I kind of switched paths at that moment. And so SAE, which, is a worldwide, I guess, audio engineering school, it had just opened up here on Music Row, and it had been open for, I think, half a year. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. It's like a 9-month program. You only study audio because that's the only thing I cared about at the time. And then you're out, So I decided to go that path. It was a lot cheaper as well. And they, they get you through and teach you all the DAWs and signal flow, and they've got a Neve and an SSL console there. And you learn about drum miking and just the basics, just enough to be dangerous. And so yeah, that was a 9-month program, got done with that and was finished with that. I guess I was 19 when I graduated from SAE. So I don't know, it felt like the right move because from there, then internship started at 19, and I just felt like I kind of had a head start.
And you got to do that before kind of all the studios started closing,
Yeah, it was still, Nashville was a lot different.
Not that things ever closed in Nashville, right? But
right. The commercial facilities have definitely changed a lot. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I only started really trying to pursue audio in maybe 2010.
Okay.
And by that time, there was nobody wanted an intern, at least here in Israel. It wasn't really happening. The industry was completely different by then. So
Sure.
You got in at a good time of being able to kind of see the real, the pre Napster, maybe even. This is just right before Napster, I think.
Yeah, there were a lot of good things, and then there was also some bad things, like ADATs.
Right, exactly. Well, you got to learn that experience. That for
limitations
yourself,
and Pro Tools, or for sure. No, it was an exciting time. Budgets were bigger, and
right.
We were listening to everything on CDs. So fidelity was good at the time. It was a good time for sure. So from, while I was going to SAE during that 9-month program, I was working part-time at a Starbucks just here outside of Nashville. And both of my internships came about from that job at Starbucks. That's another thing that was that job at Starbucks set up everything. Even my wife, the way that we met all stems from this job at Starbucks. The first internship, there was a guy who would come in all the time wearing a BMI hat. And so one day I was like, oh, BMI, are you, a writer for BMI? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm a composer for television. I do a lot of stuff on CBS daytime. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to school. I love, producing and mixing and audio in general. And he could just see that I was just super passionate about making music or making records or recording. And so, he asked me a little bit about what I'm into, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm a composer. I have had a lot of interns over the years. I can just tell that you're the kind of person that I'd love to bring into my camp and help out, just because I can see, how hungry you are. And I said, great. He's like, let's take some time to meet up and go out to lunch. And so I guess, maybe a few days later, a week later, we went out to lunch, and he offered me a position just as an intern. And, I spent a lot of time with him working on the music that he was doing for daytime television, primarily a show called Guiding Light, which was, well, I think maybe is the longest running TV show in history. And
wow.
So it was a lot of recording piano and doing some string sessions and vocal recordings, and even towards the end got to come in and do some songs with him, or write some of my own material that was used in the show. And so it was a good intro. It wasn't really I never thought that I would head into that direction for a minute of the kind of the TV side of things. I was more into the rock and pop stuff at the time. But it was a great internship, and a lot of the things that I was a part of won some Emmys. So that was kind of where that all started. And at that same time, while I was working with him, I was still doing some part-time hours at Starbucks, and met another guy. A guy came in, and he asked, something came up about music, and he's a guitar player, session guitar player or something.